well, I went to graduate school thinking I was going to study like Soviet gender history and, write all about how the early Bolsheviks had it right in terms, which a lot of scholars of my generation had already been doing, is to look at ideas of like marriage itself in capitalist societies as a reflection of capitalist values. And once the state comes in and takes care of families and everything, that the kind of marriage that was contingent on money dissipates. It's a kind of radical socialist view of, what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a man, gender. I went to graduate school thinking I'd study that, and that's what I started to do. And then there was the market was kind of flooded, if you will, for that topic. And while I was in college, my last year of college, I took a trip to Ukraine with the class I was in, and that would have been 1990. So it was a really exciting time to be in Lviv, which is where we were. Um, and we were kind of partnered with students there, right, from Michigan, and then students there. And there was a hunger strike going on at that time. Ukrainians were striking, and they were obviously striking to like get rid of the yoke of Moscow, if you will. Um, but while I was there, I befriended a guy who was a journalist for a Russian military magazine. And I just like, I don't know, there's something about his interactions with other men and the friendships that developed within those kind of circles between men that fascinated me. There was a kind of affection, a like a camaraderie that at least for my, 20-year-old eyes looked so different from what I had seen in the United States. It sounds almost simplistic, but it really hit me. Like, thought about why is it that like men can embrace like that or kiss, not, whatever. Like, there was a kind of homosociability, I learned after was the word to use that seemed different in the Russian context. So when I got to graduate school and I was kind of formulating papers, I wrote a paper. This may be very esoteric, but I wrote a paper in my graduate studies about the friendship between Alexander Herzen. So if you know anything about Herzen, he was like the so-called father of Russian socialism in the 19th century, and a guy called Nikolai Ogaryov. They were childhood friends, and they wrote these like incredibly romantic letters to each other, right? There's nothing sexual about it necessarily, but it was a kind of like they loved each other in a way that they were very free to express. So I wrote one of my graduate research papers about the friendship between Hertz and Ogaryov. Professor loved it, so it kind of got me thinking about that topic. And then when it came time to choose a dissertation, I was already studying gender theory and all of that. So it was a time when people were beginning to think about masculinity as something worth studying in addition to femininity. So I took the path least trodden and I decided to write a dissertation about masculinity. And I needed the easiest way to get into the Russian archives at that time was to study an institution. So I picked the university. So I studied university students in the first half of the 19th century in Russia around issues of gender and masculinity and sociability. They were all male institutions at the time. So I picked three spots in Russia. I was in Kazan, Moscow, and Petersburg for the archives. And I ended up writing a dissertation that was on about like taverns. It was about a lot of space taverns, fencing, and fraternities. It was fun. Friendship, family, and the state's ideals. So I picked five different ideals of masculinity and then wrote my dissertation. It was a lot of fun. And one of the interesting things, maybe to an audience who's not a Russian historian, is that in order to get the archival materials, I needed to, it's a really kind of a patronage system, or was in the Russian archives. Like I couldn't go in and say, "Hey, I'm looking for, do you got any like homosexual material? Or do you have any like, there's no, I mean, they wouldn't even understand and they'd say, get out of here," at least in the 90s, probably even more so now, but for sure in the 90s. So I would fill in the little slip of paper that said I was interested in university like revolutionary politics in the 19th century because that they liked. And so it would bring up all of these materials about students' social lives, which is what I wanted to look at. So you had a lot of people, you kind of had to circumvent and you choose your words carefully to get the information you wanted from the archives.